The existence of two Carolinas, North and South, often puzzles many Americans due to their shared cultural and political heritage. However, the division between these two regions predates the establishment of the United States and was ultimately a source of relief for those involved. The territory that would become the Carolinas first encountered European explorers in 1512, with the arrival of the Spaniards, who did not settle or name the region. The French followed in the 1560s, and the English soon after, but their colony on Roanoke Island famously disappeared without a trace. For several decades, European interest in the area waned until 1629, when King Charles I granted settlement rights to Robert Heath, an MP who ultimately did not pursue development. A few settlers from Virginia ventured into the region, but it remained largely unoccupied by Europeans until 1663, when Charles II awarded the land to 8 influential men known as the Lord Proprietors in recognition of their loyalty, renaming the entire territory Carolina. A few years later, the first permanent settlement was established in Charlestown, now known as Charleston, leading to a gradual influx of settlers. By this time, the distinctions between North and South Carolina were already becoming apparent. South Carolina's settlements were largely established by plantation owners and enslaved individuals from the West Indies, particularly Barbados, who sought new land for cash crops. The region's climate proved ideal for cultivating sugar and rice, resulting in the emergence of slave plantations supported by affluent businessmen. While European settlers primarily concentrated in urban centers, like Charleston, between 1670 and 1715, over 25,000 indigenous individuals were sold into slavery in South Carolina, with a comparable number of black slaves imported by the mid-18th century. By this time, the majority of South Carolina's population consisted of enslaved individuals, while most of the white population was either affluent or urbanized, if not both. In contrast, the rural North exhibited a significantly lower reliance on slavery. Although slavery was present, particularly in the tobacco sector, most settlers were of lesser means. Many had previously been indentured servants from other colonies who could not afford to own slaves. North Carolina quickly earned a reputation for attracting rougher, poorer settlers, while wealthier individuals migrated to the South. Consequently, Northern Carolina became the most populous region, whereas Southern Carolina emerged as the wealthiest. A competent government might have sought to bridge this divide. However, the Lord Proprietors, consisting of 8 men in distant London with divergent views on governance, were far from effective. The vast and unwieldy Carolina territory was poorly managed by its new leaders, who were plagued by apathy, incompetence, and excessive ambition. This struggle for dominance among the proprietors left the Carolinians weary. Ultimately, the Earl of Shaftesbury, one of the proprietors, prevailed with his vision of creating an ideal society. He enlisted the philosopher John Locke to help draft an experimental legal framework known as the Fundamental Constitutions of Carolina, which outlined a peculiar society that advocated for individual freedoms and liberal principles, while simultaneously endorsing slavery and hereditary rights. The nobility was associated with an ambitious urban planning initiative aimed at optimizing efficiency, safety, and aesthetics in future cities. This was a daring endeavor for any government, and as expected, it faltered under the stewardship of the proprietors. With communication and travel between Charleston and the northern regions proving challenging, the laws imposed by the Lord Proprietors held significantly less weight, far from the colonial capital. Consequently, local governance began to fill the void. enabling towns and communities to manage their own affairs with minimal reliance on Charleston or London. Distant governance soon became synonymous with corruption and inefficiency, sentiments that were increasingly prevalent throughout the colonies. The distrust and resentment towards the Lord Proprietors reached such a level in the north that a settler named John C. Pepper, residing in Albemarle County, orchestrated a bloodless rebellion against their officials. Pepper rallied a group of men, imprisoned the Lord Proprietor's tax collector, and conducted their own elections. Although Pepper was summoned to England and faced a trial as a rebel, Lord Shaftesbury ultimately sided with him, acknowledging the absence of effective governance. In Carolina, Shaftesbury conceded that Pepper and his supporters were justified in resisting any entity that claimed to be a government. As a result, Pepper was acquitted, marking a significant embarrassment for the Lord Proprietors. By this time, news of the disorder and mismanagement had spread widely, leading new settlers to bypass Carolina in favor of other locations such as Pennsylvania, in a desperate bid to attract more settlers. The Proprietors revised the fundamental constitution no fewer than 3 times in 1682, which only served to reinforce the skepticism of their critics. The government faced significant challenges, as North Carolinians persistently resisted and revolted against the Proprietors, reinforcing the South's perception of their neighbors as disorderly troublemakers. A notable bloodless uprising in 1711, led by Thomas Carey against the proprietor-appointed Edward Hyde, illustrated that the management of the colony had not improved. The year 1711 proved to be particularly arduous. In addition to Carey's rebellion, the region suffered from a severe drought and an outbreak of yellow fever. However, the most significant challenge arose from the indigenous Tuscarora people. In September 1711, the Tuscarora launched a surprise assault, expressing their frustration with the settlers. For a week, they killed hundreds of settlers, destroyed farms, and slaughtered livestock throughout North Carolina. A substantial number of settlers perished, and many major settlements sustained considerable damage. By the time British troops arrived as a relief force, the area was nearly desolate. Although the Tuscarora would gradually be diminished in the ensuing years, the initial devastation they caused was profound. The situation was so dire that officials contemplated abandoning North Carolina entirely and relocating the survivors to the south, but most survivors opted to remain. This marked a breaking point after decades of ineffective governance, economic disparity, and conflicts with Native Americans. Frustrated, the Proprietors decided to separate North and South Carolina, effectively relinquishing the troublesome North Carolina to the king as a distinct royal colony, placing the responsibility on him. This proposal was largely welcomed, and on January 24, 1712, North and South Carolina were officially designated as separate colonies, never to reunite. Although South Carolina would also transition to a royal colony in 1719, there was never a serious effort to reunite the two Carolinas. The relationship between the two colonies extended beyond mere nomenclature and ineffective governance. Any residual resentment dissipated swiftly, leading to amicable relations as both colonies united in their opposition to British rule. Following the onset of the Revolutionary War on May 23, 1778, South Carolina was recognized as the 8th state in the United States, with North Carolina joining as the 12th state in November of the subsequent year. Presently, the two Carolinas coexist as friendly neighbors, sharing numerous values and a rich historical background. We appreciate
Thank you
your
for watching our
viewership
video.
of our video.
You can support our
You can
work
support our
by becoming a member
efforts
on
by
YouTube
becoming a
or on
member
Patreon.
on YouTube or
Links below in the
Patreon.
description.
Links are provided in the description below.